Good afternoon, I guess would be the time, everyone. Anyone who watches this, it's Gordon Cossie, as usual. Live and unscripted, minus Candy the Wonder Pup. I normally do my live streams later in the evening, typically around 9 to 10:30 p.m. in the Eastern Standard Time. And I do them from my dining room where I have a backsliding door goes out to the deck in our backyard, which unfortunately, anytime I do a video during the day, I have to come into what we typically refer to in this house as the junk room. Formerly used to call it the army room. It was where I kept all my excess army kit. And I still have some. That's a surplus army cot there. I have a Canadian and American flag emblazoned on it, somewhat emblematic of me. I'm Canadian born, bred, but I did spend 10 years growing up down in the United States. Thomas, my friend from the Netherlands, Sojourner Didymus, uh, is on being in the Netherlands. It's the middle of the night when I do a 10 a.m. or it's rather a 10 p.m. video Eastern Standard Time, North America. He's always, it's the middle of the night there. I've got Danny from my Montreal friend showing up as well. Fantastic. I just last night I did a live stream and um, I finished that live stream and then was immediately hit with the news that everyone woke up to this morning, and that news being that Syria and its capital city of Damascus has fallen. A group called HTS has um, has taken over pretty much a large chunk of Syria, and Bashir al-Assad, the now former dictator of Syria, has fled late last night, like I'm talking about 2 a.m. Eastern Standard Time, early morning hours in the Middle East. There were reports out that a plane carrying Bashir al-Assad had left the radar, and that it may have been shot down. And there was speculation that Bashir al-Assad could be dead. As things stand now, it's being reported that he has sought asylum, exile, I don't know how exactly you want to frame it, in Russia. However, no one's heard from him. There has been no confirmation, at least not in the within the last half hour. A half hour ago, when I was setting this up, there was still no word as to whether Bashir al-Assad, former dictator of Syria, whether he was still alive. And now Syria has fallen to a group called HTS, which stands for Hayat I can't even pronounce it. I don't speak Arabic. I'm not going to try. But the English translation of what HTS stands for, I believe, is incredibly significant and is not getting a lot of play. And Hayat al-Tashad, or whatever this HTS is in Arabic, in English, it means the Levant Liberation Organization. It's an organization for the liberation of the Levant. And that is a term that I used right after October 7 when I first started commenting on the situation in Israel, aware of the fact that a lot of people regard Israel as an illegal country, an illegal Zionist enterprise. That's the way that those who hate the Jewish nation state and all things Jewish will refer to it, as an illegal Zionist enterprise. And they don't recognize Israel. And it gets very problematic. What do we call this region? Under the Ottomans, it was part of their southern Syrian district. When the British took it over, it was given the British Mandate for Palestine. The British Mandate for Palestine then gave birth to the Emirate state of Transjordan, which later became known as Jordan. And so at one point, I referred on a few occasions to this small little region on the Levantine coast, the Levant. And but we have a group now ruling Syria that is proposing a provisional government that bills itself as the Levant Liberation Organization, or the Organization for the Liberation of the Levant. I mean, it sounds like a Monty Python Life of Brian skit. Yeah, the Judean People's Front, the People's Front of Judea, the Popular Resistance, the Popular Front, yet all these different groups. And that's somewhat akin to what is happening in Syria now. HTS appears to be the dominant group. This is a Sunni Islamic group that is believed by across many sources to want to impose Islamic Sharia law, but they're not to be confused with Hezbollah, Hamas, Houthis, which are Iranian backed groups, and Iran is Shia Muslim. And the Shia and the Sunni do not always get along. And what had been happening is that Bashar al-Assad was able to maintain his hold on power. I did a video about this recently, about pipeline politics and how the Assad regime was back in around 2010, 2011, faced with the choice between a Russian-backed pipeline and an American-backed pipeline. The Russian-backed pipeline wanted to transition Syrian natural gas through Iran, which Iran is a Russian ally, and the American proposal wanted to transition that natural gas through Turkey, a NATO country, a US ally. And Bashar al-Assad, now the former dictator of Syria, he chose the Russian-backed pipeline. And so now we're back in the Obama administration. And what the Obama administration did was to fund, finance, train insurgency groups, rebel factions within Syria, in hopes of destabilizing and toppling the Assad regime so that they could get their pipeline through. It's an editorial comment on my part, but the Americans don't have any problem with the dictator so long as that dictator bends the knee and basically adheres to, bows down to American interests, American corporate interests, American geopolitical interests. So you can be a dictator, you can be brutal, you can suppress your population so long as you're friendly to Western interests. As soon as Assad cast his lot with the Russians, then we need to overthrow him. And the Obama administration was not backing HTS, this Organization for the Liberation of the Levant. They were backing more typically Kurdish groups that were being suppressed, victimized, attacked by the Assad regime. The Kurdish people would like to see the establishment of a Kurdish nation state. You have Kurds, you have Turks, you have Arabs, you have Egyptians, you have all these varying disparaging groups unified under Islam, but not all of them are Sunni, not all of them are, some are Sunni, some are Shia. The majority of the Middle East, the Middle Eastern world, the majority is Sunni. It's probably 90%, maybe 75 anyway, Sunni. And the main hotbed, the main place where Shia has sway is Iran. Iran is predominantly Shia. The rest of the Arab world is predominantly Sunni. Let me read what's being said. I've got Sojourner Dynamis, again, that's Thomas from the Netherlands, saying, as with all destabilizations, there's always the question of power that be is benefiting from it. Is this another US plot like Libya or Iraq, or is it Russian like Crimea and probably Georgia? What I think we've seen happen, this is my own personal opinion, is that we are in a period of destabilization, and you have a number of different groups vying to be in charge. And that's both in Syria itself, by itself, and across the broader Middle East. The attack of October 7th and this attempt to eliminate the nation state of Israel from existence, and it has to be stated that ultimately that is Iran's goal. And that is why they finance groups like Hezbollah, the Houthis, and Hamas, is to, without directly attacking Israel itself, to destabilize Israel, and so to make Iran the dominant player in the Middle East, the dominant player in the Islamic world. That was Iran's goal from the start. That's my opinion, and you would have a hard time dissuading me from it. However, I am open to listening to countering points of view. I think most people share that view. It's just a question of legitimacy. Some people regard Iran's desire to eliminate Israel as a legitimate goal because they view the establishment of the Jewish nation state when they defeated 5 invading armies, 5 colonizing forces from all over the Arab world, from Egypt, from Saudi, from Lebanon, from Syria, from Jordan, 5 against 1. They viewed the Jewish Palestinians who were able to hold those forces off to a significant enough degree that they were able to establish in the former mandate for Palestine, in the former British mandate, they were able to secure some of the territory and establish their nation. And some people view that as illegal. They think Jews stole the land. They called Jews, the Jewish people who came in either as refugees or as legal immigrants under both the Ottomans and the British. They view them as not immigrants and not refugees. No, they're colonizers. Like there's some Jewish country somewhere, and they're and that Israel is a colony of something. I mean, the whole idea of calling Israel a colonizing power. Well, if that's the colony, if they're the colonizers, where's the mother country? There is none. Anyway, now, so what we've had happen, since I'm just trying to catch up on the messages, what's happened is the situation unfolding between Israel and the 3 H's and Islamic Jihad and there are other militant groups trying to wipe Israel off the map. Israel did an amazing job of basically, they pretty much decapitated Hezbollah with Operation Exploding Pager when Nasrallah was hiding in his command post, hiding beneath Lebanese citizens in a residential complex. They deep underground, 40, 50, 60 feet underground, underneath the civilian population. They'd placed a military command post, and he was taken out. The senior leadership of Hamas was decimated. Their rocket launching capabilities were decimated because you can have all the rockets in the world, but if you don't have rocket launchers, if you don't have the means to deploy your ordnance, it just sits in the ground in a storage somewhere and you can't use it. Hezbollah was said to have 150,000, 200,000 rockets, missiles, and drones ready to absolutely decimate Israel. But as Israel, through targeted airstrikes, was able to eliminate a large, significant part of Hezbollah's capacity to deliver those rockets, those missiles. And so Hezbollah, it has to be noted again, they're an Iranian-backed group. They had helped the Bashar al-Assad regime to stay in power, to fight back against these Western-backed rebel factions, not HTS. HTS, in fact, I've learned that HTS is backed by the Turks, by Erdogan. They are backing HTS because they want to destabilize the Assad regime. The Americans, though, label HTS a terrorist organization. Man, this is such a complicated convoluted, evolving situation. So Assad, he Hezbollah, he wasn't getting the support he had gotten from them previously because they were engaged with Israel. Israel was hammering the living crap out of them, so their capacity. Now Hezbollah was forced with, they're an Iranian-backed group, so they're attacking Israel, which is Iran's enemy, and they're attacking the opponents of Assad. They were spread thin, and then you have Russia, of course. Russia was also supporting Assad, but Russia, of course, everyone knows, is bogged down in its own war with Ukraine. And so they didn't have the capacity to help Bashar al Assad as well. And so Assad was in a weak position, and HTS and other rebel factions within Syria took advantage. And Bashar al Assad is gone. But I want to get to the fact that HTS in English means the Organization for the Liberation of the Levant. What is the Levant? I've referred to Israel as a small slice of the Levantine coast, but what is the broader Levant? The Levant, as a geographic region, comprises all of Syria, all of Israel, all of Lebanon, all of Jordan. So is this HTS going to seek to live up to its name, Organization for the Liberation of the Levant? In their eyes, they have liberated Syria from the control of dictator Bashar al-Assad. They've liberated that part of the Levant. But what about Lebanon? What about Israel? What about Jordan? The Levant may also include parts of southern coastal Turkey that border the Mediterranean. It includes the island of Cyprus. And there's kind of like the greater Levant and the lesser Levant. The greater Levant would also include parts of Egypt. And so are they going to seek to liberate, as their name suggests, are they going to seek to liberate the entire Levant? And then things get incredibly problematic. And I was reading yesterday or the day before, I mentioned it before, the passage from Isaiah 17, about Damascus ceasing to be a city and the cities around it. The old city of Damascus, as the prophet Isaiah would have understood it, was an ancient walled city. And in the ancient world, and even in the medieval times, we're not unfamiliar with the concept of walled cities. Historically, we have one in Canada. Quebec City was a walled city. And outside of the walled city would be other cities. There would be cities, and it's kind of in a sense, it's a bit of feudalism. In the event of warfare, in the event of attack, what would happen is the residents living in the outlying cities outside of the main city would retreat back into the city walls. So Isaiah, when he was writing his prophecy in chapter 17, that Damascus that will cease to be a city, as well as the cities around it, that they will all cease to be cities. And look who showed up, Candy, the Wonder Pup. Let me catch up on what's being written. Danny writes that the NWO benefits, and the arms industry certainly, because warfare is big for business. Raytheon, Lockheed Martin, the rest, all these companies that produce the missiles, the planes, the ordnance. Bob's your uncle for them. Shareholders are going to see an increasing dividend if they pay one. Cryptomiri is here and says, I don't want to see ISIS again or some other jihadist group. That jihad, as I understand the word, means holy war. And a jihadist is a holy warrior. And right now, HTS is affecting a very moderate tone to the world. They said they are looking toward there's more. HTS is just the dominant group. There are other groups. There are the Kurds. There are other rebel forces, but HTS is the dominant group, and they said they want to reach out to these other rebel groups, and they want to form a provisional government to because the water, water, electricity, public works, the government has to continue to operate for the people in Syria to be able to live. And that's administered by a government. And the government that was administering it was the Bashar al Assad government. And that infrastructure, that bureaucracy, everything that keeps things running in Syria, that still exists. But it's no longer Bashar al Assad running it. Now there's nobody running it. And HTS is proposing to form a provisional government, a transitionary government that is going to respect the rule of law and be humanitarian. And it sounds all rainbows and unicorns. The only thing is, when the Taliban took over Afghanistan, they said the exact same things. They said that they were going to be, moral and, observe the international law, et cetera, et cetera. And what did we see happen in Afghanistan? The Taliban, and I don't know whether they're Shia or Sunni, but they did bring in Sharia law. Women in that country were forced to wear the burqa, which you have a number of different coverings that are prescribed for women. There's the hijab, and I believe the hijab is just a head covering. Then you have the niqab, which is the hijab combined with a veil, where you only see the eyes. And then the next step, this is my understanding, is the burqa, which I think we've all seen representations of it. It looks like a bed sheet with it's disgusting in my view, and with just a slot for the eyes and maybe a little mesh piece to breathe through. Women covered head to feet. And that's what they did in Afghanistan after saying that they were going to be all, rainbows and unicorns and respect the rule of law and human rights and all the rest. So, how much can we believe? How much can we? It's an unfolding situation. And now Israel has seized territory in and around a mount called Mount Hebron. I think it's called Mount Hebron in southern Syria, in a border area, an area close to the Golan Heights. And Israel, Benjamin Netanyahu, Bibi, is saying that they are occupying this region to ensure Israel's safety because they don't know that, and they seem willing. The rhetoric is, Netanyahu seems to be saying that he's willing to give the territory back, provided it's not going to be used as a launching ground for attacks against Israel. And Israel, remember, is part of the Levant, and the group now, the lead group ruling Syria, that's taking control of Syria, calls themselves, their name is the Organization for the Liberation of the Levant. So it's nuts. So I'm just going to read up on what's being written. Danny's writing, "The enemy of my enemy is my friend." And that is not, that to my way of thinking is a poor statement. It's a commonly held statement. The enemy of my enemy is my friend. But I think I like the way Jesus rendered it better when he came off the mountain. And there's the passage in Matthew, Mark, and Luke. And what happened was John, the Apostle John, or the disciple John, went up to Jesus, the Lord, and said, "We found a man casting out demons in your name, and we forbade him because he does not follow with us." And Jesus rebuked John and said, "He who is not against you is for you." And there are other passages similar to that. If they're not against you, but the Jewish people, Israel, doesn't know if HTS is against them or not. So they may not be friendly. They were against Assad, but are they also against Israel? Because Israel is certainly a part of the Levant. It's part of this region. Go on to just do a search, DuckDuckGo, Google, whatever you like. And where is the Levant? And you'll see there's a dark area, which is the Levant. Kind of, I'm referring to it as the Greater Levant, and then there are areas that are lesser Levant. And so the Greater Levant, again, Syria, Israel, Jordan, Cyprus, and perhaps parts of southern Turkey. But then the Greater Levant would also extend into Iraq. It would extend into Egypt and probably a little bit more of Turkey. So we're talking about a significant region, somewhat the linchpin in terms of geopolitics, realpolitik, because we're talking about the nexus of three continents: Africa, Asia, and Europe. Israel and the Levant region has always been a nexus. And then there's this whole concept of greater Israel, this Israel as described in the Old Testament in books like Genesis, where it's basically in broad strokes, greater Israel, the land that God promised to Abraham and his descendants, included all the land basically from the Nile all the way through to the Euphrates River, was greater Israel. And there was a time during the reign of King Solomon where they did, the Bible reports that they did rule over that area, although when you got out to the Euphrates, when you got into Asia, further into Asia that way, they were vassal states that paid tribute to Solomon. So they weren't Jewish in the sense of, it wasn't the Hebrew people, it wasn't the nation of Israel occupying and cultivating. They weren't working the land. There were vassal states to the Israelites who paid tribute to King Solomon. That's reading from the book of Kings, First Kings. Anyway, I'm going to read up on what's being written. And Danny says further, it's a game of whack-a-mole on a global scale. And I think more dominoes are going to start to fall. More dominoes are going to fall. I think within the next, it could be hours, it could be days, it could be weeks, but more is going to happen. The entire Middle East is becoming incredibly unstable. And there's a tendency, President-elect Donald Trump, on his Truth Social account, has put out basically saying, Americans, we have no skin in the game, or this isn't our fight. Let it play out. Rhetoric, line similar to this. He's just saying, let them deal with it. Go to town. And advocating that the United States not get involved. And should the Western world get involved, things get dicey here. Things get incredibly dicey here, because when we talk about the Middle East, we're talking about the Eastern Mediterranean Ocean, we're talking about the Red Sea, we're talking about the Suez Canal, and we're talking about the potential for shipping routes to be extremely disrupted. Ships, because of the Houthis in Yemen firing at boats in the Red Sea off their coast, the Red Sea, the Arabian Sea. It was forcing ships. Some ships were transiting around the continent of Africa, going around the Great Horn of Africa, and adding, I think, a week or two to their journey. And the world's economy is now so integrated that, when in a country like Canada, where I live, we have ports in Quebec and Montreal and on the West Coast in British Columbia. Ships are coming in from all over the world, and they are dropping off goods that are put onto trains, onto sea containers, loaded onto boxcars, transported all across Canada. And so it's significant. And obviously, it goes without saying that the impact it could have on oil production globally, on global oil production, if the U.S. or if the Arab world, the Middle East, if all of a sudden there's a significant or total shutoff of the oil supply coming from the Middle East. Yes, we have other sources. We've got the North, we've got the North Atlantic. We've got, Venezuela. We've got Canada's oil sands and such. But, it's that old line of supply and demand. If all of a sudden a significant portion of the world's supply of oil is shut off, what happens? Demand doesn't go anywhere. We still need to drive our cars. Prices could go through the roof. Are we going to be facing violence on this side of the Atlantic? Passions are running hot. We already had rioting taking place in Montreal with destruction of private property, cars being set on fire. There are all kinds of things that can happen. And I'm going to be doing a video later tonight. I mentioned last night that I wanted to do a video on, can we trust the Bible? I know that there's a pervasive narrative in the world that the Bible is a book, an old superstitious book that has no bearing in a modern world, and that the Bible's been changed, that what we read today is not what was originally written, that the Council of Nicaea changed the Bible because Rome took the religion over and they changed scripture to suit their needs. And I'm going to confront that tonight. I'm going to give my thoughts on that tonight, because I do believe the Bible, there's a lot of fallacies being promoted, that the Bible was the Council of Nicaea changed the Bible, and I hope I'm able to show you how that is in fact not true. Now, is that to say that Rome, through doctrine, certainly changed the interpretation of Scripture to suit their needs? Rome wanted to be the center of the universe. Israel was superseded by Rome, and they introduced Roman doctrine, but they didn't change Scripture. We have copies of Scripture going back to the second century, in the years 100 plus, 100, 150 into 200. The Nicene Council didn't happen until the year 325, and we have copies of the Bible, papyrus documents that predate Nicaea, and the Bible is the same. What we have written from before Nicaea and what we have now, it's the same. You might argue over punctuation. You might argue over how one word was translated, but it's the same. And so I'm going to be talking about that tonight. Let me just read up on this, and then I'm going to go barbecue some dinner. Sojourner writes, I was catching up on last night's stream when this one popped up. Very good. Everyone's just saying hi. Doesn't look like there's much for me to comment on. And Sojourner's tapping out and wishing me blessed rest of the day, and a blessed rest of the day to you and to everyone joining in. It is, Sunday. There's another point that people like to argue: is today the Sabbath? Well, no, Saturday is the Sabbath. But as Paul writes, some venerate one day over another. Do what you do in veneration in with God in your heart. And whether you gather, worship, observe on a Saturday or Sunday, orient your heart in the right direction, and in my books, all is good. So Danny's asked me to enjoy the barbecue. I will. I always love the barbecue. It's 5 degrees out. We had a huge snowfall last night, 15, 20 centimeters. But by 2, 3 a.m., it switched to rain, and all the snow was gone. I didn't have to shovel the driveway. So we'll talk to you later tonight, probably around the more typical 9:30, 10 o'clock. And yeah, the door behind me magically opened. That was Candy the Wonder Pup. There are no ghosts in this house, just Candy. And she came in and out. So God bless. We'll talk to you later tonight. We'll see what happens. Something might happen between now and then. We might find out Bashir al-Assad is dead, or we might find out that he's alive and well in Moscow and living in exile. So anyway, God bless all. We'll talk to you tonight. Except for Sojourner, he'll probably be in bed. All right. Good night.